Hello and welcome to my channel. I am happy to see you here and I hope that you find some value in what I've created today. So I am a sewer, I'm a creator of things. I love fabric, I love notions, I love rainbows. Any opportunity to make something is just, I'm over the moon. That's my happy place. So today I was struggling to find a pattern to make a small cocoon for a newborn. A friend of mine is having a baby and she wanted that. And I decided, hey, I can make that. I'll do it as a gift. And so I went online and started looking for patterns and I came up with nothing that I liked. So I decided to make one. Simply going online and finding some measurements, I sat down and drafted this myself. So you can see here I'm kind of debating shapes and such. So the average newborn baby is about 20 inches from head to toe, so I figured I could go 20 inches and that gives them room to grow. Hey, that rhymes. And then I went ahead and measured from shoulder to shoulder is on average about 7.5 inches, so that gives me a width of 15 inches. So yeah, this was a shape I was debating making this in 3 pieces and then ending up with a seam down the back and the sides, but I decided, you know what, I'm gonna go simple. I grabbed my rulers and the fabric that she chose, which was this beautiful fox print from the Fabric Snob, and decided just to cut myself a rectangle. So my rectangle is going to be exactly 15 inches wide and 20 inches tall. If you're not aware, if you're using a knit fabric, you can tell which side is the wide side just by giving it a stretch. Whichever way stretches the most is typically going to be your width, and the part that stretches the least will be your height. So here you can see I'm cutting that using my rulers and rotary blade. Pro tip, I'm sure in some of these scenes my finger is in front of the blade. Please don't ever do that. That is how I've cut my hand like 9 times out of 10. I don't spend a lot of time cooking, so I don't cut my hand in the kitchen very much, but I do cut my hand sewing all the time. So yeah, don't do that. So I'm gonna need to put a seam down the back of this. So here I am just laying it out to see how it looks. And it looks good. I want the bottom to be slightly narrower than the top because babies have narrow feet and wide torsos. So here I'm just kind of playing around with the fabric to see how I'm going to do that. I'm going to start by marking the exact middle of the bottom. And once I've marked that, I'm going to see where my side seams are going to, well, the side of my fabric is going to meet into the middle of the back. So here you can see me laying that out and just marking which would be the quarter of the width. So to get this a little bit narrower at the bottom, the easiest way is just to put a little pleat in there, and I'm showing you doing that now. And that gives you what kind of looks like a little envelope opening at the bottom. If you want it to be narrower than this, you can of course make the pleat wider, or if you want, you can fold the pleats and then fold them in again toward the center, and I show you that in a minute here. So here I am just pinning the side so that when I'm sewing it doesn't stretch out of shape, because it is a knit fabric, it will stretch some, so I want it to be quite even here. I'm going to show you how to do this on a on a sewing machine. This is not a Singer, and on a serger. So you're just going to, I'm using a walking foot here, which is an even feed foot. So you're just going to load it in, and you're going to start at the top, do a little back stitch, and then sew right down the middle of what's going to be the back of the garment. I can sew right over these pins. They very rarely ever get stuck in my machine, so it's just faster. If you don't want to, if you're worried, just pull them out right before they get there, and always wear safety goggles. Because reasons. Safety is important, people. So once I've done that, I'm just going to show you here on the serger the exact same process. You simply load it in and you're just going to sew down the whole length of the garment, pulling out your pins as you go. Here I don't have my blade on because I don't need it on, so that's why that's happening. Yeah. So once you've trimmed off your threads, you want to trim them really small. I didn't show you that here because I'm going to finish the bottom anyway, but you want to make sure that you either trim them or tie them off. So here's if you want it to be really narrow at the bottom, you just kind of invert those pleats so that they're folded towards the bottom. That'll give you like a 3-inch opening instead of mine, which I think is about 6 inches. So I'm just readjusting my pins and then gonna feed it right through the sewing machine again, just using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, just sew straight down there. I always backstitch even if I'm pulling the thread out later because I don't know, it's a habit I have. My garments tend to hold up to a lot of wear and tear, and I attribute that to my backstitching and being a crazy person. So here you just trim off all these ends, and you can see when it's folded out it kind of looks like the bottom of a bag or an envelope, which I like. It looks pretty neat, and I feel like it's gonna dry a lot faster and just be easier to use long term. Once you trim off the ends of your serger tails here, if you're using a serger, you're gonna want to use a darning needle, and you can just thread that through your seam allowance, and voila, you are done. You don't need to do anything fancy to finish off that seam. Here I'm just trimming the threads. You don't want to just cut it, because if you do, then basically you've lost all of the security of your seam. So that's why I feed them in through the seam allowance here. These don't ever come out. They've never on any of my garments. So the last part that we need to do is just to finish the top here. You can see it stretches quite a bit, so that's going to be awesome. I'm just going to cut a band really quick for the top of my cocoon, and I've decided to go ahead and cut that to be about 4 inches by 15 inches. 15 was my starting width. So once you've cut that piece, you're just gonna fold it in half, and once you fold it in half widthwise, you can sew up the open seam. You can also fold it down again like I just showed you there and sew it so that it's like half size. It's like less sewing and easier to turn your band, but it does make the seam a little bulkier, so I don't usually do that. Once it's sewn, you just flatten out this seam and line them up, and you're going to want to pin around here every 3 or 4 inches depending on your fabric. This is a knit fabric with lycra, so it tends to, once you've washed it, it tends to roll more. So if you're cutting a piece from the very end of your bolt or end of your fabric piece, it's going to have a big roll there, so you're going to need more pins. Here I'm just marking every quarter. So to do that, you match up your seam that you've sewn, you fold it in half and then pin like what would be across from there, and then you just match those 2 pins up together, and you can you can pin the quarter width, and then you're just going to match that up with the top of the sleep sack. So this is going to give you like an even band when you're finished. If you don't mark them evenly, you can end up with gaping sections that are kind of really bunched up or not. So on your sewing machine, you're going to find a bunch of different stitches that are really good for knits. Generally speaking, a zigzag, a 3-step zigzag, a back stitch, or any of the overlocker stitches are going to work really well, and they kind of look like a zigzag with a line on the side of them. All of those are good for knit fabrics. You just want to make sure that you're feeding it through evenly, and once you're done, you're going to be able to still stretch your fabric without those threads breaking. If you were to do just a really tight straight stitch, it might look nice, but anytime you go to wear the garment, whatever it is, any kind of stretch that you put on that seam is going to run the risk of it popping, and it's very typical to happen with like t-shirts and stuff. If you've ever bought a new t-shirt and then like out of nowhere you hear the seam, the thread kind of just like break, that's what that is. It's just because it's a straight stitch. So you can see me pulling here, it pulls really well. So once I was done, I decided that I was going to make a hat. I do have a hat pattern, but I don't know where it is. So I went and got some measurements online and then failed at math horribly, like really bad. I'm kind of ashamed of this, but I'm showing it to you anyway. I've been out of high school for like 20 years. So that's my, yeah, that's my story. I'm sticking to it. So basically, what you're going to do here is get like you can do this for anyone. You could make this kind of hat for any kind of baby. I mean, you could make it for an adult too, but the type that I'm making actually has a little knot at the top. So, I mean, it would be kind of weird on an adult, but like, if that's what you want, like you be you, it's awesome. So yeah, you're just going to need the head circumference. In this case, I kind of averaged out between like a 1 month and a newborn because I didn't want it to just fit for the newborn stage. I wanted her to be able to wear it for a while. And then I decided on the height, which is going to be the length of my piece of paper, which is 11 inches. And then here I'm just kind of using my artistry to create a hat shape. I've seen these hat patterns before, so I kind of know what they look like. So like that's my advantage here, my only advantage. I don't really worry too much when I'm drafting patterns, like especially for babies, because babies don't care and they look cute in anything. Like you can put a baby in a paper bag and they're adorable. So, you know. So this is going to be basically a quarter of the hat. So you're going to fold your fabric and you're going to cut it on the fold. The stretch is going to go across the brim of the hat. Once you've cut this, you're going to want to test to make sure that it is going to be long enough to tie a decent knot and look good, which is what I do here. And then you're just going to need to cut another one, a mirror image for the back of the head, because it would look silly without a back. Once you have two of these, you're just going to lay them right sides together and sew up both sides. My only tip for this is because it comes to a point when you're sewing this, you're probably going to want to start at the bottom of the hat where the brim is, the widest part of the hat, and sew towards the point. If you sew in the opposite direction, you run the risk of that tip getting stuck in your machine and pulling weirdly and your seam not lining up. It's just a headache. So yeah, follow that line that I just showed you. Once it's sewn, you can just tie the threads here and trim them because nobody ever looks. That's my reason entirely. So once this part's done, all you need to do is make a brim. For this, I decided to go with a 1.5 inch brim across the bottom of the hat. So I'm going to cut a 3-inch piece by the width of the hat, which is 17 inches. I also decided at the last second I was going to change that to 16 inches just so that it pulls in a little bit and sits a little tighter against your head, more like a hat would. So once you cut that piece, you're going to do it exactly the same way as you did the binding for your cocoon. You're just going to fold it in half lengthways. Oh wait, widthways? Yeah, widthways. And you're going to sew the width together. And then you're going to match it up again on your raw seams and sew it in place. It's kind of frustrating when you're new to knit fabric to sew like this. So if you're having any difficulties, just know that you're not the only one. Be patient with yourself. Put a lot of a lot of pins in. You can see here I put them in like every 2 inches because this is one of the raw edges, so it's like extra curly. So yeah, just go slow and steady and make sure that you use a lot of pins to hold your fabric in place and you'll be good. It's really just a matter of practice when it comes to knit fabrics. And actually a lot of people enjoy using knit fabrics versus wovens because they can be a little bit more forgiving. So there's that. If it looks a little bit wonky, it's not the end of the world. Probably you're the only one who's going to notice. So you can see here I'm stretching all of the fabric at the same time so that I'm getting a really even pin. So like if you stretch them all and then grab one place so that like one spot in the fabric while it's stretched and then let the stretch go, you're going to pin it pretty evenly. And then while you're sewing, just try not to stretch it at all. Let it kind of feed through evenly. Sometimes if the brim is like a little narrower than the hat, then you might have to pull on the brim a little bit. But in this case, the difference is so small that I didn't even notice. The machine was just fine pulling it through on its own time. With this, I don't use my blade unless I need to cut off seams because I don't want to dull my blade for no reason, so that's why that was happening. Then again, you're just gonna need to grab a needle. I don't know why you're staring at nothing. Oh my goodness. You're just going to grab a needle and thread your tails through and hide that in the seam. And then you're done. I hope you like this video, and I hope that it's given you some ideas and helped inspire you to just make stuff that you need to make and not, get too bogged down by the details. This is very basic, user-friendly pattern. I can tell you from experience, when you're starting to sew for the first time, you really want to keep it as basic as humanly possible, and that's really what this is. It's going to give you a good foundation for sewing with knits and sewing small things, and yeah, it's also just a lot of fun, especially for the babies. All the cute baby pictures. Of course, if you liked this video, please give it the old thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe. I don't know how many videos I'm going to be posting or what their content will be. This is kind of just the beginning for me, so hopefully I'll find lots of neat things to show you and teach you about. If there's any questions, please leave them in the comments, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. And if there's anything you'd like me to sew or teach you, I'm open to suggestions. I totally would love to be able to help you with that. I've been doing this I started when I was in high school at 13, so quite a while ago, but I've been doing it professionally for about 10 years, so I'm totally excited to be able to share that knowledge with you. I'll see you next time.